My name is Jerry Chesser. I was born in Elkhart, Indiana. At 6 weeks of age, I was moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan. I was told I went kicking and screaming, but I grew up there in Grand Rapids. I went to high school, attended Western Michigan University, where I met my wife, and we were married in 1977. And I didn't join the Navy till 1978. We lived in Grand Rapids. I worked for my dad, and realized one day that in order for me to move up into this company, somebody near and dear to me, a family member, was going to have to die, really, for me to move up. And Carol and I talked, and I had talked about the military service for years and years. And she told me one day, let's go to the Navy recruiter, let's talk. So we went down and I took the tests, and he came back in all smiles and basically said I qualified for just about any program that I wanted to get into. Well, at that time, recruiters were given a bonus if you signed up for the Navy nuclear power program. So I thought at that time, I would join the Navy, learn nuclear power, move back to Michigan, to Benton Harbor, where the civilian nuclear power plants, and live happily ever after. So as I sit here in Broomfield, Colorado today, obviously that plan changed as we went through. Interesting story with Carol, my wife. On July 4th, 1977, Carol dropped me at the bus station in Grand Rapids. That night, I went to, the bus took me to Detroit. On July 5th, we finished all of the paperwork for me to join the Navy. And off to Great Lakes Naval Training Center I went, Recruit Training Center. And so the morning of July 6th, about 3 o'clock, we'd gotten to bed about 1. At 3, the garbage can went down the center of our barracks, and we were awoken, and thus started my first day in the Navy's, in the naval service. Went through boot camp there in Great Lakes, and just thoroughly enjoyed it, learning about Navy history and just the different aspects, the foundation of the Navy, what the Navy's there for, which is basically to protect the seaways for free trade across the world. I was named the educational petty officer for our boot camp company. My job was to make sure that everybody understood what the classes were and to mentor them and teach them. That later became my passion. I went on to get several degrees in education. I was also named honor man for our boot camp company, and we were the state flags. 928 was our class, and our job was to go to different public functions and display all 50 state flags and, of course, the national flag for any parades or anything that happened in and around the community of Great Lakes Naval Station. I was left behind at the barracks to stand watch while they went out, and I missed my opportunity to be out into the civilian world. But one night at boot camp, a thunderstorm came through Chicago, and we were all in awe of the different colors of lightning that came out of this thunderstorm. I don't know why I remember the thunderstorm, but the pollution in the air caused the lightning to change different colors. But then in September, I graduated from Recruit Training Center, and I became an E3, which was basically a fireman for the program that I was going into. From there, I had a few days off, went back to Grand Rapids, was around family for a few weeks, and then Carol and I together moved to Chicago, Zion, Illinois, where I was attending Machinist Mate A School, and I learned how to turn a wrench. And previously I had worked in boiler rooms, different gas turbines, low pressure steam systems, and so the engineering aspect of this really drew me. And so becoming a machinist mate in the Navy seemed like a logical step. It was something I was very passionate about and wanted to learn more. So I went through machinist mate A school, and we learned how to tear apart different pieces of Navy equipment, put them back together again, learned about gaskets and high pressure steam plants, and stood watch on a high pressure steam plant, and got acclimated to a surface steam plant, surface ship steam plant. Had the opportunities to learn many different things. From there, I was assigned to Navy Nuclear Power School in Orlando, Florida. I'll say with a master's degree in education, which I referred to a little bit earlier, that was easy compared to Navy Nuclear Power School. This was 6 months of the most intense training that I had ever been in. It was the equivalent of getting an associate's degree in nuclear physics in a 6-month time period. So we would spend 8 hours a day learning nuclear theory, educate the equations, understanding how atoms split, why they split, the energy that's released while you're doing that. Mechanical theory at the same time. We would learn all about turbines and high pressure air and pneumatics and how hydraulic oil behaves and just the theory behind that and the equations, the math that goes with it. Chemistry, not my favorite subject at the time, but we learned what chemistry did to a steam plant and to the Navy, the nuclear power plant as well. And then there was electrical theory and chemical engineering, all part of this program for 6 months. And we would spend 40 to 60 hours a week at the beginning. For me, it was 60 to 80 hours a week in the last half of that school, trying to comprehend everything that they were trying to teach us. And just intense. And I got most of it, understood most of it, enough to pass the very final exam. And it was just, like I said, to this date, the most intense training program that I had ever been through, trying to understand how a nuclear power plant and associated steam plant works. I'm going to say 50 to 60% of all the classes combined, so 150 guys or so going through Navy Nuclear Power School, 50 to 60% of them failed out. And another 10 to 20% at prototype school failed out. So it's not easy to do those kinds of things. So I feel very fortunate and privileged to have the knowledge that I was given to be able to fulfill not only the technical aspect, but to learn from some of the best leaders I could have possibly been around, to go up through the chief, senior chief, and master chief ranks of understanding what it was that I needed to do and how each one carried a different weight. At that point, I graduated from school and I was put on baby hold. Carol was expecting our first son, so they delayed my departure by 6 weeks to go on to Navy Nuclear Prototype School. And John, our oldest son, was born in Orlando, Florida while we were there. My temporary duty was to be the personal driver for the captain of the naval base there. So I drove, cleaned, polished, washed the captain's car, and my assigned duties were to take him wherever he wanted to go. On each Thursday, I would drive out to the Orlando airport and pick up the reviewing admiral for Friday's graduation service at the Recruit Training Command. There was also a boot camp there in Orlando. So I had to pick up rear admirals, vice admirals, admirals, each Friday, who was going to be, whoever the reviewing officer was for that graduation for the boot camp. Side note on that, one of them was a rear admiral that I picked up. And I will tell you that 12 years later, that rear admiral was an admiral. He was the commander of the submarines of the Pacific Fleet. He toured a submarine that I was assigned to when I was making Chief Petty Officer, and he signed my charge book, which cost me a hefty fine at Chief's initiation. Having an officer sign my book, let alone ComSub PAC, which commander of submarine Pacific Fleet. But I reminded him of that time. He remembered, of course, attending the graduation, but he didn't remember me, of course. But a fun story in a small world that gets smaller, especially in the submarine community. So after John was born, Carol and I moved to military housing at Westover Air Force Base in Massachusetts. And that's where we resided for the next 7 months or so, where she and John lived, and I attended Navy Nuclear Power Prototype School, which was an actual nuclear power plant. And I learned how to apply all the theory that I learned in Orlando to the physical and actual operation of a real nuclear power plant in northern Connecticut. Not widely advertised where these power plants were, but it didn't really supply any electricity or anything to the surrounding community like civilian power plants do today. But we were there to learn and train and stand watch and learning how to qualify on a nuclear power plant. And what I mean by qualify is how to stand watch, how to monitor the pieces of equipment, how to understand when things were turning south or going bad on a piece of equipment, learning how to operate all kinds of different systems. And qualify, there's a piece of paper, a card that they give you with certain tasks that you need to accomplish. And once you showed proficiency in being able to do that, then one of the instructors would sign that card. And when you finished at each watch station, then you were qualified to stand watch in that particular area of the engine room in operation of the entire plant. Good friend of mine was in New York going through the same type of program, and he called one day towards the end of his school, and he said he had orders to the USS No Name, SSBN 728, and I thought, well, I can only hope. These are orders that we're going to get upon graduation from prototype that I would be assigned to a submarine. Back in boot camp, they asked if there was any volunteers for the submarine service, and I raised my hand. And the reason I chose the submarine service, I thought it would be much more fun, much more intimate, maybe not the right word, but understanding and knowing 125 guys on a submarine to me appealed much better than trying to get to know 5,000 on an aircraft carrier. And so I decided I wanted to do the silent service or the submarine service. And so I was awaiting orders at prototype. And my orders came in, and I had orders to SSBN 728 USS No Name, along with my good friend. So we were to report to Groton, Connecticut, and go to Electric Boat Naval Shipyard, where the submarine was under construction. It was the third in the line of Trident missile submarines, USS Ohio being the name of the class, the Ohio class submarine. Michigan was number 2, and then the 728 was number 3. And they had trouble naming the submarine. They had thought about the Missouri and or the Iowa, and each of those battleships were still pretty active in the service. And finally, after being assigned to this command for, I think, just about a year, they decided that it would become the USS Florida. So my first look at my first submarine, I walked to the end of the shipyard where there's this a building that's the size of a football field. And inside there were sections of submarine from the stern to the bow, and just not even welded together yet. It was just different sections. And as I stood there, I literally watched the entire engine room being slid into the hull, at which point they would sound mount it to the hull, so it wouldn't radiate any noise out to the ocean once we got underway. But for the next 2.5 years, I built the USS Florida, and just a tremendous opportunity to watch a submarine get built from scratch, to understand the physics involved of how everything works and is put together, to go through testing of the steam plant, the engine room, to understand how everything worked there, to go through all of the testing of the nuclear power plant, to understand how it was all put together and how it worked and how it operated. This was now, even more so than prototype, an opportunity to put the theory to practice of how this entire engineering department worked, to understand the chemistry, the electrical theory, the electronics that went into it, the steam flow, the calculations that we would do to make sure that everything was working right. I was assigned different systems to become the expert on, and my chief and the Bull Nuke, the senior enlisted advisor, made sure that we knew everything that was going on with these systems, and everybody had their own to do. So we were knowledgeable about when any testing was going to be done with these systems and how the testing went and any problems that they found. So we were system experts on the different systems that we were assigned to. And we had to work with the civilians in the shipyard to understand what was going on and what they had to do. At that point, I became a E4 when I graduated from boot camp. I became E5 while assigned to the Florida, and re-enlisted. Carol and I looked at this opportunity, and the Navy was waving this huge check in front of me just for wanting to sign up for 2 more years. So I committed out to 8 years, and we took the check. While there and assigned to the Florida, we had a daughter who was born there at the New London Naval Hospital. And about that same time, we watched the Ohio go out on sea trials. And while we were putting the Florida together, and then the Michigan went out on sea trials, and we knew we were next. And very interesting experience. The launching of the Trident missile submarine isn't like what you would see where a ship, you crack the bottle of champagne and it slides down into the river. No, for the Florida, they did break a bottle of champagne over the bow, but the launch was actually moving the submarine over to a dry dock that lowered, and then they filled the dry dock up full of water, and that was the launching of our submarine. The day we launched the Florida, commissioned the Florida, we were all standing topside on the submarine in the Thames River there in Groton, Connecticut, Electric Boat Naval Shipyard. And behind us in the river was Greenpeace. making all kinds of noises, and they had megaphones and they had sirens going, and they were demonstrating that not only did we have a nuclear power plant on board, but we also carried nuclear-tipped, we're going to carry nuclear-tipped weapons. And so they were making a big demonstration out on the river. That day when we left the shipyard, the demonstrations were going on outside the shipyard as well. This was early in the 1980s, 81-ish, 1981. And I remember going out of the shipyard, and the people there had thrown fake blood on the gates and on the signs of Electric Boat Shipyard and protesting this. And they were calling me names. I mean, I was in uniform and I had there with my family, and so in front of my kids and in front of family and friends, folks were calling me names, reminiscent of the end of the Vietnam War. I don't claim to be a Vietnam veteran. I'm not. I don't know exactly what they experienced, but I had an opportunity to taste just a little bit of it. I felt like I had done nothing wrong, and yet they were protesting who I was and what I was doing for a living. And I remember somebody much smarter than me once saying that when you sign up to serve in the military, you don't sign up to serve only those that appreciate what you do. You sign up to serve everyone, and to respect the fact that they have the freedom to demonstrate and do what they want to do. What I didn't appreciate was the name calling and the personal attacks on myself during that time period. So I spent the first 2 years in the Navy never having gone to sea. Actually, first 4 years when you come about it. Between boot camp, Navy Nuclear Power School, the prototype school, that's 1.5 years, literally, of being in the Navy. Now the next 2 years, 2.5 years building the Florida. So it was close to 4.5 years before I ever went to sea. And I guess I could consider myself pretty lucky in having it that way, but yeah, that was very different, if you will. Then we went out on our own sea trials. We had tested the nuclear power plant. The entire submarine had been tested by the different departments of different things that they do, from sonar to radio to the hydraulics and the auxiliaries that went through the missile techs, and all the things that they had to do to prepare the submarine to get underway for these initial trials. And I had my my very first experience at being seasick. We decided, or the Navy decided, that alpha trials for the USS Florida should occur in February in the North Atlantic, which is not the smoothest of seas to have. So a submarine on the surface is much like a bobber on a pond. If you've ever been fishing, you know how the bobber kind of moves around and does different things. And a submarine's just a big bobber, especially when you put it on something the size of the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. So I experienced being seasick, but then that was the last time. And I realized that for me it was mind over matter, and I wasn't going to go through or allow myself to go through that again. So my first time at sea, that was good. Enjoyed it. My next big accomplishment would be getting my dolphins. On this shirt, you see the submarine warfare pin. In order to earn this, you have to go through a qualification not unlike going through nuclear power. So understanding how that worked, it made it easier for me to earn my warfare pin. All 125 to 150, depending on the type of submarine. Everybody on board that submarine has to qualify to earn the submarine dolphins, or you cannot serve on that submarine. So you have to be in the process of trying to qualify or have qualified for those. This warfare pin is the equivalent of, for instance, you buy a new car. Let's say you buy a brand new Corvette. We'll have some fun here. To qualify on that Corvette, you need to be able to draw a one-line diagram of every system on that Corvette. How a turn signal works, what makes the engine turn on, what makes the transmission work. If it's a convertible, what makes the canvas or the ragtop go up and down. But literally every system, how the headlights work, what makes the lights on the dashboard come on. If there's an alarm on the dashboard, much like cars today, you have a trouble light. You have a check engine light, you have something that's on there. You need to know every aspect of what turns that light on, what could cause that. And so we had to do that for the submarine. We had to learn what each system did, what each component does. I had to describe the different sonar aspects. As part of my board of going through this, 3 people were on my board I sat in front of, and they would ask me questions about the submarine and how it operates and how to do damage control, how to do different things. How does an oxygen generator work? How does a scrubber work? Scrubber is something that takes the bad air and cleans it up. How does the sonar work? How does high pressure air work? How does the emergency blow system work? In other words, if we had to get to the surface in a hurry and get there quickly, you make the submarine as buoyant as possible. So draw a one-line diagram of how that system works and where are all the major components on the submarine and how they work. So I earned my dolphins, and as part of the ceremony of earning your dolphins, they have the 2 little pins behind there with the clasps, and I was told to find an eraser about this big and pin that to the back of my shirt. I found out why the next day, as my submarines were my dolphins, is what these are called, were tacked on by as many people as could get in line. So I turned a little black and blue. But that's part of the reward of getting your dolphins, is you get your dolphins tacked on. And the tacking process is a little painful for a couple of days afterwards. But so Florida, we finished all of our sea trials. We then went down to Cape Canaveral and loaded a missile without a warhead, and we went out to sea, and we launched a Trident ballistic missile from the submarine. And I was on board when this happened, and it's much like they have commentary. It's much like listening to launch control when they fire the space shuttle or launch the space shuttle. The rocket is this far downrange, its trajectory is this far, its speed is this far, and so on. And so you're listening inside the submarine for the different things as the missile took off. The first 2 submarines launched a Trident missile, somewhat unsuccessful. We were the first successful submarine launched Trident, to my understanding. The Ohio and the Michigan launched but didn't perform exactly as they wanted it to. The missile landed off the coast, on an island off the coast of Africa, so we were told. We were all given a picture signed by the captain of the ignition sequence as the missile made it through the surface, and literally you blow the missile up with air, compressed air basically, and as the missile hesitates or begins to slide back down, the engines kick in and it takes off, much like a launch off of regular land launch from Cape Canaveral. As I recall, the submarine think instantaneously, we lost about 10 feet in depth, which was interesting. We couldn't feel it on the inside, but that's what they told us the readings were up front. My first battle station on the Florida was a phone talker in the Missile Control Center. And so I had a chance to be watch the controls, the missile techs at their panels and turning all the knobs and to get ready to launch this thing. And then open up the safe, and the weapons officer would take the control out and squeeze the trigger and launch the missile. It's noisy out in the spaces in the missile compartment. There's things that happened out there, mechanical and electrical things that happen that actually blow the missile, if you will, with compressed gases up out of the submarine, enough that it breaches the surface before the rocket engines kick on. So there's this system that literally blows the missile out, but it's surrounded in a gas bubble as the missile is ejected up out of the submarine. And so it is literally surrounded by this bubble as it goes up, and then it breaks the surface, and then as it hesitates, the engines kick, and it's just gone. To me, amazing technology. It's noisy out there, but it's instantaneous. A small vibration on the submarine. I think it's more noticeable when we launch a torpedo than it was when we shot that missile out. But it was a very interesting afternoon as we were out there, and again, just a tremendous feeling to know that everything works while you're out there in testing. At this time, the crew has all been together, and they have now separated us into gold and blue crews. On a ballistic missile submarine, it's manned by 2 crews. And the idea of that is that submarine needs to be at sea more times than it's not. So with these 2 crews, a lot of my friends went to the other crew, and some of their friends came to our crew. And we now have what we call a crew transfer, where the gold crew now takes over the submarine, and we get to go take our families and move them to Bangor, Washington, which is where the submarine is going to be based out of. So they take the submarine to sea, and they do the things that we've done as well. And they sailed the Florida through the Panama Canal and up over to the coast of Washington to the Bangor submarine base. And I went to Michigan and picked up my family, and we moved out to Carol and I and 2 kids, and we moved to Silverdale, Washington. And the submarine came around, and I was reaching the end of my tenure on the Florida, mainly because of the amount of years that I had spent there. I was coming up on 4.5 years on the Florida. And it was time for me to have orders. And so they basically said, pick a shore duty that you want to go to, because this was considered at-sea duty. And so I made my selection to go be an instructor. Again, we get back to education again, which started in boot camp. And so I had put in for New York or Idaho to go be an instructor to teach at Navy Nuclear Prototype School, the same school that I went through. Went out on patrol, or just before I went out on patrol, I got orders, had orders to go to New York. A good friend of mine that was on the USS No Name at the time, later to become Florida, he had gone to New York. And so we were looking forward to meeting up with them, and my orders changed to go to Idaho. And the very next day I went to sea for about 85 days on Florida's first patrol first strategic deterrent patrol. And to come back to a wife that wasn't sure about Idaho and 2 kids, and we kind of laughed, but we moved, came back from patrol. And part of that is when you come back from patrol, you have 30 days. You literally give the submarine back to the other crew, and in 30 days they have it all ready to go to sea again. So they take it out for 85 days, and then when they come back, 85 to 95 days. And then the crews keep turning over like that, and the idea is that 8 months, 8 to 9 months out of the year, that submarine's at sea, and doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is at the end of the Cold War, part of the Cold War was to be that deterrent. We'd only been in Washington, Silverdale, Washington, about a year when I had orders to report to Idaho Falls, Idaho, to be an instructor out in the middle of the desert. And so for the next 4 years, we spent in Idaho. I'll never forget, as we came across Washington, Oregon, and into Boise, Idaho. Between Boise and Idaho Falls, there's an interstate that runs across southern Idaho, and my wife asked me, just where are you taking us? All we could see for miles and miles were mountains and sagebrush. And I said, don't worry, we can do this. At the time it was 3.5 years tour. And even with the anxiety of seeing nothing but sagebrush, it turned out to be our favorite duty station. Once we got to Idaho and got settled, we realized Yellowstone National Park was 2 hours away, which is like your backyard. Our side yard were the Teton Mountains. And so we had a lot of opportunities to do that. It was about an hour outside Idaho Falls, Idaho. Atomic City was one of the closest cities, but an hour almost straight west of Idaho Falls. There was 3 reactors that were out there, owned by General Electric or Westinghouse, and the Navy used them for training platforms. There was an aircraft carrier nuclear power plant, there was a destroyer nuclear power plant, and then a submarine nuclear power plant. And the submarine nuclear power plant is the one I had a chance to teach at, to qualify on, and then be the instructor there. Yeah, it was quite a facility that was out there.
You don't think of that as Navy?
No, and when people ask me, like, all right, Jerry, what did you do in Idaho Falls, Idaho? And I said, well, there's a secret underground river from the Pacific Ocean all the way into Idaho, and I'd have to kill you if I told you any more than that. And they're looking at me like, are you serious? And I went, no, I'm not serious. And then they realized that finally I'm just telling a story. So there is no secret underground river from the Pacific to Idaho Falls, Idaho. And it was a training platform of teaching young, unqualified nuclear operators how to operate an actual nuclear power plant. So I qualified, I became an instructor, and again, the educational experience that I was receiving via the Navy. During my time there, I was awarded a naval instructor title. I can't quite remember the name of it right now, but it'll come to me. But it was a top-notch instructor type of thing where you videotape yourself, you do classroom presence, you do teaching and the like. So I had an opportunity to do all of those things, and just thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to be an instructor, to teach. My last year there, I was the out-haul instructor, which basically meant during that time period, I took 600 total students who had graduated from Navy nuclear power school, brought them into the classroom phase of prototype, and myself and a handful of other instructors did all the teaching for them, to teach them the different systems and how they worked for the specific plant that they were going to go learn on. And just a tremendous opportunity not only to lead, to manage people, to manage a facility, and to instruct all different types of students that were coming through. And thoroughly enjoyed the tour there. While I was there, we decided that the prototype, the nuclear power plant, would be refueled. So I was a lead mechanic for the refueling of the nuclear power plant and the overhaul and maintenance while we were there. So during that, I extended for 6 months. So during that 4-year tour, we decided, Carol and I decided that we would extend for 6 months and have the opportunity to bring the plant out of its overhaul status and back into a training platform. And it's very important to the Navy to have continuity of those that have been through a refit or a reconstruction, if you will, refueling of the plant, to bring it back up to speed again and how it works. So I have been through, looking back at my career now of coming up on 10, 11 years, not only had I seen the new construction of an engineering spaces in the entire submarine, now I had gone through the refueling process of the nuclear power plant and an overhaul of the steam plant. That later became very beneficial for me as well. You're opening a vessel that contains a nuclear reactor. So cleanliness controls are, it's as clean as a hospital, or cleaner in some cases. The radiological controls to make sure that we're not exposed to too much radiation are very tight. And that's just in getting the old core off. And when we're doing that, there's Marines around to make sure nobody messes with anything nuclear, whether weapons or the core itself. It's very tedious, it's very strenuous, it's hard, it's a dirty environment. And then when you get the new core put in and you have to put the cap back on the vessel and weld all of that up, and then you have to do all kinds of testing to make sure it doesn't leak. And then you do, in a very, very controlled process, you have to bring that reactor plant to life to make sure that it's been manufactured the way it's supposed to, and that it's going to perform and operate the way you want it to. And it is such a controlled environment, controlled procedure. I was there 3 times when we did initial criticality on this. And it's getting to the point where the reactor can heat up enough and do what it needs to do. You literally double the watches in the space to make sure that there's 2 sets of eyes watching each meter as we go through it. And you have civilian engineers that are monitoring everything. You have it is so scrutinized and so supervised, and we have to go through a tremendous amount of training just to be able to do the procedure of the initial startup of a reactor. It's rewarding in that when you get there, it's like, but very, very tenuous, very strenuous, and like I said, a tremendous amount of training leading up to that. We always wore personal monitoring equipment. So we could, anytime we were in a situation where we knew we were going to be around radiation, there was rules and regulations put in place that not only did we wear our long-term monitors, but we could wear a monitor that we could look at through a light and see just how much exposure we were getting. I'll say in Idaho, when we refueled that reactor plant, that plant had been operating for a while, so there was points inside the reactor compartment itself that had high radiation or higher radiation, just because of the amount of years that the plant had been operating. So certain things happen, certain materials collect in low flow points and they become radioactive and so on. So one night we were doing the high pressure test of the reactor itself. We had just put the new core in, the new welds had been put in, everything's tightened up. And so my job was to go in and to monitor a humidifier that could detect the smallest amount of any water vapor escaping from this seal. And I'll say that 12-hour shift, I probably got the equivalent of maybe 2 or 3 chest x-rays that you would get for a medical procedure. And for us, that was high. That was a lot of radiation for that period of time. Unavoidable, and we would minimize the time that we were close to any of these spots inside the compartment, inside the room. And it was hot in there, and I was dressed in anti-sea clothing and heavy cotton type jumpsuits. And so speaking of practical jokes that go along with this, it didn't cause me pause. It just, you want to minimize how much you get. And when I left the Navy, I had a very low dosage of radiation that I had received. So as a practical joke, it was right around Halloween time, and they have those plastic tubes that you can break and shake up, and they glow bright colors. And for some reason, we had some of those, and it was an hour bus ride to get home. And I got home and hot, sweaty, and I had about 6 hours before I had to catch the bus to go back out there, because we were 12 on and 12 off, and you had to catch the bus a couple of hours before your shift started and so on. And I had told my wife that I just want to shower up, have a sandwich, and then go to bed. Well, I had one of these little glow sticks and told her that I had received a lot of radiation that day. And through hook or crook, I went to bed, and she followed shortly thereafter. Well, in the sheets was this green glow stick. So when she lifted the sheets to get in bed, it just lit up the room, and she jumped back and, what in the world is that? And I kind of looked down and said, oh no, I've gotten more radiation than I thought I'd gotten today. Again, as a practical joke, and she'll hate me for telling that story, but it is it's part of my sense of humor. So that's a long answer to your question about radiation and things. The training that we receive tells us to minimize. We're going to get some, but tells us through all the different procedures and routines that we do to minimize the amount of radiation that we get. And you're trained to do that as you go through the service. And they keep very accurate records of how much radiation you receive during your career while you're in there. And it's part of my medical record even today. So at this time now, I am a E6, first class petty officer, first class machinist mate. And I'm up for chief, and it's hard to make chief at this point. So I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do. After a very long conversation with my wife, we're approaching the 11, 12-year point of my naval service. And we decided that we would re-enlist again. And that would take us out to 16 years. Yeah, and I said, well, if we're going to do that, then we're going to make this a 20-year career, at least, and go forward. So I re-enlisted again, and got us out obligated to go out much further. We also had our third son, or our third child in Idaho Falls. Jason was born while we were there. And so I have a son that was born in Florida, a daughter born in New England, in Connecticut, a son born in Idaho, and thank goodness we never moved to San Diego, because we probably would have had a fourth kid to make all four corners of the United States, having another child. I'm kidding. As I reached the end of our Idaho experience, we decided that, the next submarine tour, and where we wanted to go. I had a mentor at the time. He was a senior chief, and told me about that I should apply and look into what they called special operations submarines. And I said, "What's that?" And he says, "Well, it's submarines that go out and do different things, ocean engineering projects, and then they come home again." And I said, "Well, okay, that sounds kind of interesting." And he says, "Well, you're going to get, if you apply for that, you have to go through quite a process, because you have to have clearances for what you do, even just to be a nuke and work in the engineering spaces." So I went through that process. Two plainclothes suits came out and interviewed me in Idaho, and asked me about the program and what I knew about it. I knew very little. Later I would learn a whole lot more, but then the FBI did a 15-year background investigation on me. I even got a call from my parents back in Michigan wanting to know if I was in trouble, because the FBI was running around Grand Rapids, Michigan, asking questions about me. And all that was, and I said, "No, I'm fine. I'm not in trouble. I've just applied to a very special program where I need security clearances, well beyond what the Navy had given me already." So at that time, the Parche was located or berthed in Vallejo, California. We got housing there, and I reported aboard. And as I walked onto the pier where the Parche was in dry dock at the time, I noticed that on top of the submarine was a reactor refueling facility. And I realized then that detailers don't always tell the truth. Loved my detailer, but evidently he had not been informed that the Parche was going through a refueling of the reactor plant at that time, and a complete engine room overhaul, which I had just finished in Idaho. We would not be going to see anytime soon. And as I got closer to the dry dock, I noticed that the submarine had been cut almost in half. That the section forward of the sail, the part that you can see sticking up above the submarine, had been detached and cut away, and there was a space in there, and they were getting ready to slide another piece of hull in front of that and then reattach the bow. And I said, "What is that?" And they said, "Well, you're not cleared yet to understand everything that's going on." A few days later, as I went through the welcome aboard process to the Parche, all of my paperwork had come in and had been completed, and I had clearances today that I don't even remember what they were today. I remember what they're for. I remember what I can't say about the Parche. So I'll add a few tidbits and recommend a good book on the Parche. It took about, again, it took about 2 years for them to reassemble the Parche, to refuel the Parche, to go through all of the nuclear testing that we had to go through, which I was beginning to get comfortable with, and understanding all the aspects of of overhauls and new construction and reconstruction. And about this time, I was selected for Chief Petty Officer. This was before the kindler, gentler Navy, and I will I'll briefly describe my chief's initiation in hopes that I don't get anyone in trouble. But chief's initiation was a very special. The Navy, amongst all the other services, there is a huge definition between E6 and E7. E6, you wear a different uniform. E7, 8, and 9, you wear a khaki uniform. You're more of a manager and you're expected to be a leader. You are, yeah, it's just a very unique process, a very rewarding process to become a Chief Petty Officer. So my initiation, I'll just say we were, there was 6 of us, and 3 of them I still stay in contact with. We decided amongst the 6 of them that no matter what they did, the 6 of us, that no matter what they did to us as far as initiation goes, we would do back to them. So I'm going to tell you that one afternoon from the submarine, I called home and asked my wife to rent the movie Pee-wee's Big Adventure because the 6 of us were tasked with learning the Big Shoe Dance from that movie, which we had to perform the very next day in front of the chief's quarters. Stunts like this. We were given a qualification card, much like we do for the dolphins on a submarine, much like we do for standing watch in the nuclear power plant. We're given a qual card. This qual card is not for public dissemination and the things and tasks that they had us do. Much like what you see as a fraternal college fraternity initiation, we didn't have the paddles and the spanking, but we endured many other things. And the day of my initiation, we all had to dress up. I had to dress up as a little lost lamb. A good friend, Eric, had to dress up as Little Bo Peep. The 6 of us formed, I don't want to call it a club, but kind of a thing that we would do, and we just called it Think Pink. And we did some things to the other chiefs. I mean, here they are making us learn the Big Shoe Dance, performing it in front of the chief's quarters. And so here we are in my living room watching the Big Shoe Dance. My kids are home from school. Carol's watching at the same time. And there are 6 grown men in my house mimicking Pee Wee Herman's Big Shoe Dance from the movie. And the kids are just like, Dad, what are you doing? Why do you have to learn this? And I said, well, it's all part of becoming a Chief Petty Officer. And so as they would have us learn different things and do different things, we would do things back to them. We chained one of the chiefs, the day of initiation, we chained his pickup truck to a fire hydrant and locked it. So he was late to chief's initiation and got in trouble. We had to have lawyers as part of our trial during chief's initiation. And so the license to practice usually was a license plate off of somebody's vehicle that we would borrow for this initiation. And just little things like that. We were told at one point, the command master chief was on his roof of his house with a garden hose waiting for us to stop by. And after he decided to get down, or a few nights later, as I recall, we went and we painted his front yard pink to let him know that we were there. The night of our initiation, or the night before, we were sent on a scavenger hunt all over the Bay Area. Remember, we were in Vallejo, so we're going San Francisco to Oakland, San Jose. We're just all over the place, and every couple of hours we have to stop at somebody's house so they can make sure that we're okay. And so we stopped at this Master Chief's house at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he made us some coffee, and we had plenty of pink thing supplies, so we had pink hairspray. And we asked, hey, your dog needs to go out. Is it okay if we let him out? And he was in the kitchen. He said, yes, of course, let the dog out. At which point, his dog turned pink from the pink hairspray. We decided that we needed to go before he realized what had happened. We passed on the coffee and left. And the next day, during our chief's initiation ceremony, he announced in some very profane manner that his dog had turned pink during our quick visit to his house. So chief's initiation was entertaining, not only for them, but for us as well. And in the end, the whole purpose of chief's initiation at that point is to humble us and to remember that, remember where we came from. Remember that we did come up through the ranks, and just because you change uniforms and you change rank doesn't mean that you are now somehow different. And we need to remain humble and carry on naval traditions and teach those that are coming up behind us. And so it had a purpose, but there was some things that I ate that day, some things that I swallowed in the form of eggs or a homemade truth serum to get through the initiation. The very next day, I had watch on the submarine, engineering duty petty officer, which is we're shut down, so it's I just have duty as far as the engineering spaces go that day. And I will say, because of the things that I digested the day before, I was politely asked to leave the engine room several times because of the air that I was creating as I went to different places. Anyway, we made it through chief's initiation and became a chief petty officer. Typically, when you become chief, you get reassigned to a different submarine. It's hard to lead guys that you've been friends with, that your peer group and so on. This was not the case on the Parche. They actually asked me to stay and to lead and to be a part of the machinery division. So my next job was to be chief in charge of the nuclear machinist mates. I had 17 guys that were part of the machinery division. The same person who told me that I should apply for this special projects boat was now the Bull Nuke. He had come back, and the person I met in Idaho was now my boss on the Parche. He was a master chief, and he was the senior enlisted advisor, commonly referred to as the Bull Nuke. So he again had a chance to mentor me as we went through. He was my defense lawyer during chief's initiation, and his license to practice did come from his own motorcycle, which he was not happy to see when I gave him his license to practice at chief's initiation. So now the Parche is ready to go to sea and do the things that it does. And because of the clearances I had and the paperwork that I signed, I can't, even though the Parche's been decommissioned, I can't exactly say what we did and how we did it and so on. So I'm going to recommend a book. The book is called Blind Man's Bluff, and the author's last name is Sontag. And she got most of her information by sitting in bars and listening to, especially the bars around Vallejo, and one in particular, where guys would come in and talk, and she began to put things together to describe what special operation submarines did, where we went, what we did, and how we did it. And when the book was about to be published, the government tried to stop her. They couldn't. And so we were literally ordered that if we saw her out in town or at this Submariner bar, if you will, in Vallejo, we were not to talk to her. She'd already gotten way too much information. In fact, there was enough information in this book to put our lives in jeopardy for publishing this book, because now everybody could understand what it is we did, where we went, and how we did it. We were not happy about her writing this book, but it is a good book. It will answer the questions that I feel like I can't answer here about where we went, what we did, and I'll just say that the USS Parche was the most awesome platform that I served on, for its ability to be able to do different things. It had 6 presidential unit citations when I reported aboard for missions that it had accomplished, and the presidential unit citations would literally read, thank you for doing what you do, good job on what you did, now don't ever tell anybody what you did, as far as that goes. So during the Cold War, it had a huge mission in gathering data and information about the Soviet Union, Russia, and other things around the world. So carried out its mission. So I did get a chance to spend some sea time aboard the Parche and watch it do what it does, and very proud to have been a part of that platform.
How large are these subs? The crew, I think you made a mention of the crew of around 120 on one of them, but what are the kind of dimensions and what are the kind of quarters and living conditions like when you're out on these patrols for 90 days?
Well, the Trident missile submarine, the first time I even saw one, it was on a land, it was literally sitting on top of a pier. Now, the submarine's 560 feet long, and at the widest part, I think it's 40-some. You could put 4 city buses inside of it. That's how wide it is. So that's a Trident missile submarine. The Parche, I'll be honest, I don't remember all the dimensions, and mainly because it changed, and they added this section to it. There's before and after pictures of the Parche when they made this addition to it. The Trident missile submarines each crew 145 to 150 that would go to sea with us. Parche was a fast attack submarine, although somewhat altered, a crew of 125 to 130. So living conditions were a little bit different. The Parche was built differently. Trident missile submarines were built with a little more creature comforts for the sailors in them. Before I became chief, we had like 12-man bunk rooms. So, and the front of your bunk room, it was built between 2 missile tubes. So you walked between 2 missile tubes, and then 3 bunks over here, 3 bunks, or 4 bunks over here, 4 bunks on this side, and 4 bunks in front of you. And, or 3 bunks. Now I'm going to try to remember. Either way. So 9-man rooms or whatever, but each person would have his own space, and your bedpan, the mattresses were about this thick. and you could lift up the pan that your mattress sat in, and you'd have a space about this deep and about 6 feet by 3 feet, 2.5 feet, where you would store everything. All of your clothes, all your belongings. If you smoked, you had to have 90 days worth of cigarettes in there. I like to carry root beer barrels with me for candy. And then you had one small locker that you could put hanging clothes or other things in. So there wasn't a lot of personal space. You could close the curtains on that. When you close the curtains, you have an air intake at one end, and it blows out, and it blows cold air down over you. So from head to toe, it just blows that nice cool air, so you can sleep and have fresh air in your bunk, even though the curtains are closed. Well, that also is a great place if you wanted to pull a prank on somebody, and this was done to me. You take a bottle of baby powder and you spray it into the intake of that fan, and it circles around, gets cooled off, and then you have baby powder that just blows out over the top of you, makes it very hard to breathe. At which point the alleged perpetrator of this immediately departs the area because you can't breathe. There's so much baby powder in the area that you have to open your curtains, and of course you want to find out who it was and chase after that person. So, yes, practical jokes. How submariners amuse themselves. So the cruise mess where we eat was very spacious, and it was a place to hang out when they weren't serving meals. And they would serve meals 4 times a day. You're changing watches. You're changing watch at midnight, 6 a.m., noon, and 6 p.m. And for those 6 hours that you're on watch, and so they would serve a meal 4 times a day at the top and the bottom of the clock. And you could, if you didn't know what time of day it was, you could always tell mid-rats the midnight because it was beanies and weenies, fresh out of a can, and you knew that was your mid-rats or your midnight rations. Places to study. I finished my bachelor's degree while I was attached to a submarine, and so you could do classroom studies, videotapes, and things while you're out to sea. There's a cruise study where you can go to do that. You're also in there to study, to learn how to get your dolphins. You're studying in there to learn nuclear power plants and different things that way as well. Or whatever. If you're a sonar technician, then you can sit there. My most I'm going to remember one night I couldn't sleep. It had been about 4 or 5 days that we'd been out to sea, and for some reason I was just wide awake. And everybody's a friend on a submarine. You have 150 people, if you will, and another chief was sitting in sonar, and I walked in and I knocked and walked into the sonar room, and he said, "Here, if you can't sleep, just sit here and listen to this." And he put headphones on me, and I could listen to whales talk, and it just calmed me down for some reason, and I almost fell asleep sitting in the chair with it just within minutes. And it allowed me to think about other things and get my mind off, and it was just a very soothing time of day. So that was kind of neat as well. So comforts, air conditioning units to keep the air temperature down, even in the engineering spaces. The humidity was kept pretty low, even with a steam plant. The food was always great. Movies each and every night. But we worked hard as well. We trained an awful lot to make sure that we could handle anything that the submarine threw at us, what an enemy would throw at us. We practiced battle stations torpedo, battle stations missile, learning how to practice shooting a missile, practice shooting torpedoes. We would run drills in the engineering spaces to make sure that we knew how to handle anything that the steam plant or reactor plant would throw at us. we would train and retrain and retrain and make sure that we could handle these. And then we would have independent teams come on board to make sure and grade us on how well we could do these things, not only in the engineering spaces, but for weapons, for communications, for any of those things. So we were kept busy, but when you're isolated with 150 guys on a submarine, you find ways to entertain yourself, so you play practical jokes on people and you have a lot of fun doing it. So, and I go back to my career of never doing the same thing twice. A lot of people in the military will go back and do things, repetition. They find something they really like to do and they continue to do it. Well, I had done a new construction tour on a submarine on the Florida. I had become an instructor in Idaho and refueled the nuclear power plant there, along with the steam plant. Then I went to the Parche, where a special operations submarine, and again, construction and refueling and so on. Some of the things I did seemed repetitive as far as the nuclear power plant went, but I never chose the same duty twice. So now it's time for me to look at what our next shore duty opportunity is. And we looked at the opportunity to go back to Silverdale, Washington, and go to shore duty up there. Well, they needed a senior chief in the nuclear planning department. This is where all of the paperwork gets written to repair the nuclear power plants on 8 different submarines that are assigned to the Bangor sub base up there. So these are all Trident missile submarines, including the Florida. And when they come in, there's certain periodic overhauls. There's certain things that break and you have to go repair them. Well, the paperwork trail for a nuclear power plant repair is extensive. The quality assurance is extensive, and you have to literally go to school to learn how to write these repair packages. So I went to Charleston, South Carolina for 2 months to learn how to write these packages, and I came back and was a part of that. The small world getting smaller, the repair department master chief for the whole Trident refit facility was my original, when I reported aboard the Florida, my original chief of machinery division. And now I get to work for him again here at Trident refit facility some 12, 14 years later. We're working with each other one more time. And he came to me one day and said that one of the other senior chief master chiefs was retiring, would I like to take over radiological controls, which is not so fun part of operating nuclear power plants. You have to deal with the waste, the radiation, the contamination, all of the troubling things that come out of nuclear power. This is what this department did. Well, it wasn't one of my first choices to go do, but he was a good salesman and talked me into it. So not only had I done planning, but now I was learning how to plan with radiological controls involved as well. And I had to go back to Charleston, South Carolina for 2 months and learn more about radiological controls to come back and be the senior enlisted advisor for all of radiological controls. And the duties and responsibilities of that are not only the radiological controls, RADCON is what we called it, for 8 different submarines, but our own facility and different processes and procedures that submarines had to go through. And then we had to be audited by Naval Reactors, which is an independent a Navy independent auditing team that comes in and makes sure that we're doing our jobs right. So highly much more political, highly visible, and those kinds of things. And so I'm a senior chief. We're running a 24/7 operation. I have about 75 people that are part of this department, and so we're doing things well, really well. I had a great team of people that I worked with, and I'll say this about each and every duty station, each and every time I had a chance to lead, I had great people working with me and for me. I hate to even say for me. We tried to work together as a team, but had great people around me. So we went through an awful lot of audits and different things. We came through in flying colors. So I'm doing something that literally nobody else wants to do in the Navy. It's just not a fun job. It's hard. It's just not the best duty to have while you're on shore duty. While I'm there, I qualify for command duty officer, so I'm the person who stays at night or is there on weekends and literally is in charge of the entire Trident refit facility area. And again, I have people and other things that I can call, but I'm standing watch at night as part of my duties that are there. I'm also being tasked by this Master Chief that I worked for at some time in the past to do different projects, realign manning in the civilian. There's 2,000 people that worked at Trident refit facility, and it was about a 50-50 split of civilian and Navy people. So it made it for a very interesting dynamic in how all of these things worked. So after about 3 years there, 3 years there, I'm up for Master Chief Petty Officer, E9 in the Navy. And at this time, my good friend on the Parche has passed away. An old mentor of mine who was the Command Master Chief on the Parche had also passed away. And just good mentors of mine, and thinking about them the day that the Master Chief results come out. And I had the day off, but I went into the office anyway so I could make the toll-free call to see if I had made Master Chief. And I swear my two passed away buddies were messing with me on this day, and I'll explain in a second. I called the hotline and punched in my social security number, which is my ID, if you will, and it said, "Sorry you didn't make Master Chief this time, better luck next year," kind of recording. And I said, okay, it's my first time up, and I didn't expect to make Master Chief. Of course I'm disappointed, but I still know that I have opportunities. I'm sitting at 17 years in the Navy, and next year's another opportunity. And the things that I had going for me was never doing the same thing over and over again, qualifying for different watches, like the command duty officer, the diving officer of the watch while I'm attached to a submarine. And I said, well, better luck next year kind of thing. Something told me to call the number back again, and because I had trouble getting through. And on days like this, you have trouble getting through, and because everybody's calling in to figure it out, if they had made rank. So I called again, and it said, congratulations, you've made Master Chief Petty Officer. And I said, and immediately I thought of my two old mentors, and I could hear them laughing. And I'm like, you guys are messing with me today. And so I'm like, now what do I do? And so my buddy, the Trident refit Master Chief, is down in his office. I call him, he's down there, and I said, hey, I'm coming down. He says, did you make Master Chief? And I said, I don't know. I'll let you know when I get down there. And he said, what do you mean you don't know? And I said, I'll explain. So it's a 5-minute walk down the pier to his office. And I get there, and one of my peer group had made Master Chief that day, so he was happy and kind of dancing around the office, if you will. He said, "Did you make it? Did you make it?" And I said, "I don't know. I've called twice. I got a yes and a no." He goes, "Give me your number." So he called it, and then I went to the Master Chief's office while he was calling. And we were sitting there, and he came in and he goes, "I got a yes. You made Master Chief." And I said, "Well, because I've had one no answer." So we ended up calling the Group 9 Command Career Counselor, which is this, he's a Master Chief that's assigned to the group. And Joe, the guy that I used to work for back on the Florida, was just laughing. And he called up there and he said, "Ed, we need to know if Chesser made Master Chief." And he made some derogatory comment and how much money it was going to cost me to find out and some other things. And finally, he read my social security number to me. Well, the only way he could have that information was to read it off the list of selectees that I had indeed made Master Chief. So we had a hoo-ha and a celebration, and a few days later, I was frocked to Master Chief, which means you have all the duties and responsibilities, but you're not getting paid for it yet, which is how the Navy operates sometimes. So and for me, for anybody, that would be way early to make E9 at 17 years. And I look back at that on different duties, never doing the same thing twice, trying to be the best at what I could do, and have a good time doing it. And to teach those around me to do the same thing. So we made Master Chief, we finished up our shore duty, and now it's time to be reassigned to a submarine again. And so I got orders to stay right there in Silverdale to become the bull nuke on the USS Henry M. Jackson. All of the Trident missile submarines are named after states, with the exception of the Henry M. Jackson. Senator Jackson, Scoop Jackson, was on the Military Affairs Committee, I think, back when the Trident missile submarines were an idea and coming to fruition, and he helped fund them. So out of respect for what he did for the Trident missile submarines, they named one submarine after Henry M. Jackson, a senator. I believe he's, I don't remember which state he was from. I want to say it was Washington, but I'm not sure. So they named that submarine, and so for the next 2.5 years, I was on finally, after almost 18 years, I'm on a normal seagoing patrol schedule. No more overhauls, no more refuelings, just simply going to sea for 90 days and coming home and giving it to the other crew, and then going to sea for 90 days and doing those kinds of things. So I finally got it at the end. And
with the nuclear subs, were you submerged most of that time, or nearly all of that time, or were you on the surface?
No, our whole goal was to go out and remain undetected. So for those, in the entire time, we would be submerged, except when you go up to periscope depth and the submarine gets sucked up to the surface. The physics, the dynamics of a submarine, when you have a flat deck on the back of the submarine where the missile tubes are, you're approaching the surface at an angle about like this, and you're trying to keep this flat deck away from the surface. If it gets too close to the surface, it just gets sucked up. So it's pretty embarrassing if you do that, and you get ridiculed quite heavily if you do that. And yes, I was diving officer of the watch once when that happened as well. And so no, the whole idea is that the only thing that sticks out of the out of the surface of the water is a periscope where we can receive radio traffic or take a look around. But yes, submerged for the entire time except for those occasions where you accidentally pop up to the surface, but then you immediately head back down again. So, yeah.
And I don't know if you can even answer this question because you mentioned that there's some certain things that are still classified, but
Sure.
on any of these patrols, did you ever encounter any, shall we say, opponents?
On occasion. The time that we were off the coast of Florida and we were training to do the missile launch, we were submerged in doing some things, and a Russian fast attack submarine was coming out of Cuba and heading home, and it was making enough noise to that we took a tape recording of it. Sonar got a recording of it to later to give to whomever likes to listen to those things. And so yeah, I'll say in the Trident submarines and even on the Parche, our whole goal was to go out there and remain undetected. So if we heard another ship or something else in the area, we would just kind of turn around and go the other way. So that if we had to do a missile launch, no other submarine would know that we were in the area, what we were doing, and we could evade if somebody was trying to get to us in a hurry.
And submerged, how far down could you go?
Well, the statistics that they like, that they allow us to say, is that a submarine will go greater than 800 feet in depth and greater than 20 knots. So I'll stop there. So we can go greater than 800 feet.
Are these like the Trident class, are still operational?
Yes, they are. I don't know that any of them have been decommissioned. So as far as I know, some of them have been converted into different types of submarines. SSBN 728 USS Florida, now it's an SSGN. I don't remember right off the bat what the difference, but SSBN was submersible ballistic missile. So the GN is guided missile or something else that's different. But so the Florida has been changed into something else. The Parche has been decommissioned, and the Henry M. Jackson, as far as I know, those three submarines that I served on, is still carrying ballistic missiles out in the Pacific someplace. When we're out on patrol, when a ballistic missile submarine's out on patrol, the patrol area that they're assigned is about the size of the state of Montana. So you can, our goal, our mission is to stay within that box and stay undetected. So they can put that box in different places around the ocean, but that's our operating area. And again, it's about the size of the state of Montana. So it's a pretty large area to be in. Then through some experiences and things and understanding where my next duty was, I went through the qualification process to be a command master chief and had finished that. And missed my oldest son's high school graduation. And Henry M. Jackson had pulled into Hawaii to do some things, and I had the opportunity to fly back to Washington to go to my son's graduation, and they wouldn't let me go. They said I needed to stay on board, and so I did. I followed the orders of staying there. At that time, my parents were living on the Big Island of Hawaii, so I hopped on a puddle jumper and went over and saw them for a day. Called my son the day of his graduation, and we talked. And knowing this was a possibility, I left a letter behind for him to open just in case. And of course, we both cried for the fact that I couldn't be there at his high school graduation. But it started to get me to think about my own career. And I had always put the Navy first, and what I wanted to do, what I wanted to accomplish, and Carol and I would decide where we would like to go for our next duty stations and preference and those kinds of things. But it was like the Navy was 1 and my family was 1A. And realizing how much I had missed of my family, I now have 3 children who've had a part-time dad for my son's high school, all the way through high school, my daughter well into junior high, and another son who's well into elementary school, and they've had a part-time dad. So I did some thinking as we left Hawaii and came back to Washington State, back to Silverdale, Washington, and in my own way, prayed a lot, thought, and just kind of listened for a response, and called the detailer when we got home. This kind of comes full circle. So this is, January, February or so, and I called my detailer, the ones who don't always tell you the truth from back on the Parche. And I said, look, you need 2 years of being in pay grade to get paid. So if I want to retire as an E9 and get that pension that comes with that, I have to be in that pay grade for 2 years. And that 2 years coincided with just about exactly 20 years of service. So I called the detailer and asked him a question. I said, do you see this the same way, that my 20 years and my 2 years in pay grade are very close to each other? He said, yes, what are you thinking? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, please give me plenty of notice. And so Carol and I talked about it, and it was time to request for retirement, request for transfer to Fleet Reserve, and put my family number 1 instead of my Navy career. And don't get me wrong, my Navy career is very important to me. It taught me everything that I am today, and will become and have become. My family is very important as well. And so I put in a request to go to Fleet Reserve, and I came back from patrol, and another good friend of mine from the Parche days was on the pier, and he, as we pulled in, he gave me the thumbs up that said my request had been approved. And knowing that it was most likely going to be approved, on the way in, our captain hated smoking of any kind. But I was a master chief, and I knew this was going to be my last patrol. So I had a cigar, and I went topside as we were on the surface on our way in, and I lit up that cigar and was smoking that cigar. Well, the wind changed just enough so that somebody knew that I was down below them smoking the cigar, and it was who in the world is, kind of like that, who in the world is down there smoking a cigar? And the captain leaned over and saw me, and he goes, Master Chief, carry on. And so I finished my cigar and knew that the last time I had been underway had occurred. And it was bittersweet.
Have you talked to older guys that were on the older submarines?
You know, I have. Not many, but a handful, the old diesel boats. They laid the foundation for the submarine service that we have today, that I had a chance to serve in. Those guys, the ones that did the World War II diesel submarine service, those guys to me are my heroes. They made the submarine service happen. They were the ones that put things in place that allowed the submarine service to grow, to be better than it's ever been. But they had to go through trials and separations and long patrols and they didn't have they ran on diesels and batteries, and we have those on the nuclear submarines, but you hardly ever use them, except in situations. But so the submarine service itself, the Dolphins are they're shaped differently for the diesel boats, and there's a reason for that, and it's because they laid the foundation for what I did, and they went out and endured a submarine service that didn't have any of the comforts that are out there today. They would hot rack. In other words, the rack's still warm when you get in it because you and another guy are sharing a rack, and it's not a warm fuzzy feeling, but that's how confined the spaces were. The places they went, the patrols that they went on, and I look at how many submarines that were lost in World War II, and the ceremony to me is one of the most special ceremonies for the submarine service. It's called the Tolling of the Bells, and it's a ceremony that talks about all of the submarines and the men that were lost in World War II and past that, including 2 nuclear-powered submarines that never came home. And we say that those guys are on eternal patrol. But to me, they're amazing because they served on a submarine much different than mine. And I can only see and grasp when I tour one of those boats what they endured. And I had it easy, I think, compared to some of those diesel boat sailors. They are my heroes.
The one guy we did get to meet, and I don't know if you ever had a chance to meet Clay Decker, did you?
I don't think so.
Okay. Clay has had artifacts here in the museum. USS Tang, World War II.
Yeah.
And he was one of the 9 that got out of the Tang when it went to the bottom and off of Taiwan.
The Tang is a prominent display at the World War II Museum down in New Orleans. It actually, they take you through the hot run torpedo that came back at the submarine. They have a periscope, a control room, and quite a display of the Tang that's down there. And I had a chance to tour that, even knowing here at the submarine that we've had some things here with the Tang, but to understand what actually happened to that submarine. Yeah.
In the library, we have DVD. It's over 2 hours of him talking about his experience on the Tang.
He was one of our earlier interviews.
I may have to borrow that
Yes,
someday.
You should
borrow that.
because he was on oxygen, but he was still very strong, very lucid at the time. He knew that he had some breathing issues, but he took off and he went. And not only did I think he did 4 or 5 combat patrols with the Tang. The last one is where they were sunk, and he describes in great detail the process that they used to get out, the very experimental equipment that they had to get out, and how most of the people that tried it didn't even make it to the surface.
Right.
But then he talked about being a prisoner of war in Japan for about the last 8-9 months of the war. And his roommate, his bunkmate in the POW camp, was Pappy Boynton.
That I have read his book.
Okay.
And I don't remember that he talks about that guy, but I
Well, it's they were bunkmates in the at a special prison camp in Tokyo Bay on an island.
Yep.
And actually, when the war ended, the Allies came in. They were taking the star prisoners like Pappy Boynton, some of the higher ranking guys. Pappy says, "You're taking my friend Clay with us on the first plane back to San
I
Francisco."
do remember that now. Yeah, it's part of the
Yeah, and so Clay was part of that first group that came in. So.
When I retired from the service up when we were in Silverdale, Washington, I joined a company who they needed a training manager. So I applied for the job, and was the assistant training manager, and about 6 months later I was the training manager. And the company installed underground infrastructure, fiber optics, electric cables, sewer lines, and they had developed the technology for directional drilling there in Seattle. And so I would either take the ferry across or drive around through Tacoma. And we had a couple of training facilities with the company. There was several offices all over the United States. And I worked for them for about 4 years. And in my last 2 years, the guy who ran the Western region from Denver came up and talked to me, and then he had me come down to Denver, and he kind of grew to like me. He had worked with Navy nukes in the past and had a good experience evidently, and told the company that he wanted me down here in the field, and so we transferred with that company here, and so I was the safety and training manager for the nationally for the company. Then I had a chance to go work on the operations side while doing safety and training. I was sent to Phoenix to turn around an operations center that was losing money, bleeding money poorly, It took us about 3 months to turn that operation around, and about that time, the entire company changed. The management structure, the ownership of the company changed, and I had an opportunity to go start my own business. And started a franchise business here in Broomfield. After 6 years, built that up and sold it, and then started another franchise business and built that up, and I still do a little bit of that today, which is business coaching, business consulting. Let's see, I've obtained the master's degree in education, got a bachelor's degree in education while I was in Bangor, Washington as well. And then a couple of years, 4 years ago, I was challenged to go to seminary for a few years, and finished the program at seminary, was a pastor for about 2 years, and then I've led a very full life. I've been a sailor, I've been a business owner, I've worked in corporate America, I have worked for a family business, I have been a pastor, and now I'm retired. And my wife and I are going to go do some traveling around the United States and live in a motorhome and serve through an RV Christian ministry every couple of months, where we go to a camp and just do some facility maintenance and help out as much as we can. So we're gonna go and serve, and when the travel bug leaves us, we'll settle down here in Colorado someplace and be close to the kids and the grandkids. But I've had a good life, a wonderful wife of 41 years, 3 great kids, 7 grandchildren, and my mantra going forward, or for the last 10 years and going forward, is live life with no regrets. And if there's something you want to do, go do it. Don't regret not doing something. And so we're going to do that. We're going to go see some different things. Carol and I have never seen the memorials in Washington, D.C. I haven't seen the Vietnam Memorial, the Korean World War II. I haven't seen any of those memorials, and that's going to be one of our first stops, is to go pay honor to all the veterans who went before me, including my dad, who served in World War II. So, yeah.
Do you know much about what your father did in World War II?
He was a electrician's mate. He I think when he got out, he was a 3rd class electrician's mate. He was stationed aboard the USS Macassar Straits, which my understanding is a baby aircraft carrier. It was a transport aircraft carrier for men and machines and planes, and made several trips from 44 to 45 across the Pacific to different islands. First taking people, jeeps, and planes over there as they were supplying for Iwo Jima and the different invasions that they did over there. And then in 45, bringing all the stuff they took over there back, mainly the people. And he said on his last cruise back across the Pacific, the hangar bay of this aircraft carrier was just full of people, just guys, ready to come home. And so he was a part of that in bringing a lot of the troops back home at the end of the part of the Pacific War. So, Dad, through that, Dad instilled in my brother and myself, in some way we should give back to this great country that we live in. That we should somehow or another serve our country. So my brother spent 3 years in the Army. His overseas assignment was in Korea, up at the DMZ, Panmunjom, I think is the name of the little city there. And I had all intentions of only spending 6 years in the Navy and again retiring back in Michigan, but I had talked about it long before Carol and I were married, and one of the best things I ever did after marrying my wonderful spouse, Carol, was joining the Navy. And it gave me an education, it gave me discipline in my life, and it gave me an opportunity to serve my country as my dad had raised us to do. So, yeah.
And I think the last question I have is, how did you get involved with this museum here?
Oh my goodness, the Broomfield Veterans Museum. Let's see. Mike Fellows and I served on the Broomfield Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. Mike found out that I was a veteran and told me about this museum. I had no idea it was here. And it took me a little while. I was trying to get a business up and going and some things. And finally, I spent a little time here, and Mike asked me if I would join the board of directors. I can't tell you what year that was, but I applied and they accepted, and I served on the board, served as vice chair or vice president behind Mike Fellows, I think. 2 years as president of the board, 1 year as past president, and then I stepped away for a while to let the museum grow and do some of the things that it needed to do. And a lot of things have happened since my tenure as president. I want to say Mike and I laid the foundation, but the tremendous amount of growth, the acquisition of the basement in this building has all happened in the last 6 months. It's just been tremendous for this museum, and it's no longer the best kept secret of Broomfield that it is here and it exists, and its mission is to preserve the history and the memory of the veterans of our community and the surrounding area. So they are fulfilling the mission, and that's how I got involved, and wonderful group of guys that runs this museum today. Memorial Day is meant to remember those who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our country. Veterans Day is to celebrate those who have served our country, and part of serving our country and recognizing each of the services is to be able to poke fun at one another, realizing that we're all on the same team at the end. So that's my goal and my philosophy, is that we can all laugh at ourselves, be thankful for the veterans that we do have, and to hug a veteran every once in a while. I enjoyed the Navy career. I'd do it again. I wouldn't change a thing. I learned a lot. I served with some awesome people. I served on platforms that were just unbelievable. that you can carry around 24 missiles and do it safely, and you can operate a nuclear power plant and do it safely. That you can serve on a special operations boat and do it safely and be a part of what that platform could do. And so I just, I had a little more than 20-year career. I retired at the highest rank I could possibly achieve. I wouldn't do it any different. I had a great time. Pulled a lot of practical jokes on people that I'm not sorry for. Had a lot of practical jokes pulled on me. And what you've just heard is some highlights of what I thought was a awesome 20-plus year career of Jerry Chesser in the submarine service.